His name is Charlie Gard, and at 11 months, Charlie is at the center of an international conversation on the right to life, with both Pope Francis and President Donald Trump stepping in. Baby Charlie suffers from a rare genetic condition and is unable to breathe unaided. His parents have raised nearly $2 million to bring him to the U.S. for an experimental treatment. But last week, the Guards lost a legal battle as the courts ruled Charlie will be pulled from life support. It's a move that goes against the parents' very vocal wishes.
If he's still fighting, we're still fighting. And he's still fighting over there, believe me, he's still fighting. He's a little fighter, he's a little trooper, and he's a soldier. He will fight, and he'd fight to the very end, and he's still fighting, but we're not allowed to fight for him anymore.
On Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump got involved, tweeting, "If we can help little Charlie Gard, as per our friends in the UK and the Pope, we would be delighted to do so." Pope Francis and the Vatican have been outspoken defenders of Charlie's life and of his parents' rights. Vatican Pediatric Hospital Bambino Gesù offered this week to transfer Charlie to its facilities, but the London hospital where Charlie is living refused the transfer. And a statement issued by the Vatican spokesman last Sunday underlines Pope Francis's support, declaring, "The Holy Father follows with affection and emotion the story of Charlie Gard and expresses his own closeness to his parents." These gestures came shortly after a statement from the Pontifical Academy for Life, which drew criticism for allegedly not showing solidarity with the family. The Academy's president, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, saying, "We must also accept the limits of medicine and avoid aggressive medical procedures that are disproportionate to any expected results or excessively burdensome to the patient or the family." Dr. John Haas is president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center and a member of the Pontifical Academy for Life. He joins us now from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dr. Haas, thank you for your time.
Sure, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be with you.
The European Court of Human Rights says the hospital can withdraw life support because it was likely that Charlie would suffer significant harm if his present suffering was prolonged without any realistic prospect of improvement, and the experimental therapy would be of no effective benefit. Dr. Haas, what's your response as a moral theologian and expert in bioethics to the court's conclusion?
Well, I don't think the court is in the position to be making that judgment. That judgment should be made by the parents of the child, not a court.
One question in regards to this case that keeps getting brought up over and over again is the topic of extraordinary means versus ordinary means of keeping a child alive. Ordinary meaning preserving life, extraordinary prolonging a life. Do you believe Charlie's parents are taking extraordinary means in keeping their child alive?
The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops have issued something called the Ethical and Religious Directives for Catholic Healthcare Services. And they deal with what may or may not be done within Catholic healthcare institutions to conform with the moral law. And there are actually two directives that deal specifically with this issue, and they define it quite clearly and succinctly, if I could read those.
Please do.
Okay, it's Directive 56 and Directive 57. Directive 56 reads, "A person has a moral obligation to use ordinary or proportionate means of preserving his or her life," and then it defines them as proportionate means are those that, in the judgment of the patient, offer a reasonable hope of benefit and do not entail an excessive burden or impose excessive expense on the family or the community. So the bishops, speaking out of the Catholic moral tradition, say that we have a moral obligation to use an intervention that offers a reasonable hope of benefit and that does not entail an excessive burden in the judgment of the patient. Now, you brought up also extraordinary, and Directive 57 deals with that. A person may forego extraordinary or disproportionate means of preserving life. Then the bishops define what this means. Disproportionate means are those that, in the patient's judgment, do not offer a reasonable hope of benefit or entail an excessive burden or impose excessive expense on the family or the community. Now, in this case, this very sad situation where a child is dying from an inherited genetic disorder, which cannot be cured. So the interventions really offer no reasonable hope of benefit to the child and may indeed be imposing an excessive burden. Now, because the means are termed extraordinary, that is, there's no moral obligation to use them, but that does not mean that there would be a moral obligation to stop using them. So if it's an extraordinary or disproportionate means, the patient decides whether or not those interventions should continue. And in this case, since little Charlie can't, well, in this case, that's right, the baby can't make these judgments, so the proxy decision makers for the baby are the parents, and so it should be the parents making this judgment and this determination, not the courts, not the hospital, the parents.
Dr. Haas, you were, as of a few weeks ago, appointed to the Pontifical Academy for Life. The Vatican has issued a statement in support of Charlie's parents. The Vatican Hospital has offered to take Charlie in, but the original statement from the Pontifical Academy for Life received pushback. Archbishop Quigley, the head of the council, saying aggressive medical procedures that are disproportionate to any expected results or excessively burdensome to the patient or the family must be avoided. What do you think Archbishop Quigley meant by that, and is it something you agree with?
Well, I mean, I think he was speaking in terms of the directives, the two directives that I just read. There's no moral obligation to use excessive means that offer no reasonable hope of benefit. There's no requirement to use them. One may forego them because we know that we're not born for this life anyway. We're born for the life to come. But this means that one may choose to go ahead and use these extraordinary means if that decision is made on the part of the patient or the part of on the part of the patient's proxies. In 1980, the Holy See issued a declaration on euthanasia, and it addresses this situation as well. It says that you are not required to use disproportionate means, but it does go on to say, if there are no other sufficient remedies, it is permitted, with the patient's consent, to have recourse to the means provided by the most advanced medical techniques, even if these means are still at the experimental stage and are not without a certain risk. And as I understand the news reports, the parents wanted to take their child, bring the child to the United States to undergo an experimental intervention that might be for the child's benefit. But again, the courts refused to allow them to do that. And as far as I know, the courts have even refused to allow the parents to take their child home to die, which I really don't understand.
Dr. John Haas, president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center, thank you for your insight on this and for your time.
I was glad to be with you. Thank you, Catherine.
For a continued analysis of the Charlie Gard case, we're joined now by Mallory Quigley, the communications director for the Susan B. Anthony List. Mallory, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Catherine.
This story is capturing the world's attention. What are you, as a leader in the U.S. pro-life movement, closely following here? What strikes you?
Sure. Well, I have been watching this story with great concern and compassion for Charlie and for his family. It's reminded me a little bit about Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler's story. If you remember, she's a U.S. Congresswoman. Her and her husband were given a prenatal diagnosis. Their daughter, Abigail, had Potter syndrome, which is typically considered fatal, and they were encouraged to abort their baby. But they chose life, and they sought an extraordinary new experimental treatment here in the United States at Johns Hopkins University. And what do we have now? Not only is Abigail healthy, alive and well, but we have a treatment now for Potter syndrome that future children and their parents can benefit from. And I think that, you know, we cannot cure these maladies without patients. If we're going to kill patients before we treat them, we'll never have sound medical advances. And so that's one thing I've been thinking. You know, Wesley J. Smith, who's a writer for Charlotte Lozier Institute,
and also will be on this show later on.
Oh, incredible! Well, he has a wonderful piece on First Things, addressing this concept of what is fetal care, so-called fetal care. And I think any time that we are making judgments about what lives are worth living and what lives aren't, that we need to be extremely cautious. And there's a lot of parallels here between baby Charlie's story and babies that are being diagnosed in the womb with fetal abnormalities.
President Donald Trump is getting involved in this. He's tweeted about it. Members of his administration have spoken to the Gard's family. What do you make of that gesture?
Well, I thought it was a very diplomatic gesture and very encouraging to see the president reach out and say that the United States stands ready to help. I think that members of his administration have been in touch with the family in conversations facilitated by the British government. I hope that more comes of this. It's wonderful to see President Trump, but also Pope Francis, really pricking the conscience of us as a world. How do we as a people respond to the most vulnerable of our species?